Chhavi is a radio and podcast producer, consultant, and coach. She is also the most experienced podcaster in India and has been making podcasts since 2008, which makes her one of the few radio reporters and producers in the country. Her features have been broadcast on the BBC, World Service, National Public Radio, Deutsche Welle, Radio Netherlands, and Public Radio International. She has produced podcasts for Sonologue, Tall Tales, Tata Sons, Bound, the Canadian Consulate General, and others. Since 2011, Chhavi has been conducting regular workshops for individuals, corporations, as well as NGOs. And over the years, she has done hands-on workshops for media organizations such as the Quint, specialized day-long workshops on making audio features and narrative podcasts for cultural organizations such as Goethe Zentrum, and along with others. Please join me in welcoming her here. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Chhavi. Over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. I am more than pleased to be here. I've done several workshops with the CSR box through CSR Academy. And the reason I'm here to talk to you about podcasting and using podcasts for impact through audio is because I passionately care about these, both these things. And I have done a lot of work in the development sector. So to tell you a little bit about myself, Pooja has been very kind. I run Sonologue, and I also have worked with a bunch of different organizations doing workshops. But you'll notice there are a bunch of NGOs in here. And I also do a lot of work independently on the topics of sustainability, climate change, innovative solutions, human rights, women's rights particularly, water, migration, and other kinds of issues. And these are all very close to my heart. So among my credits are the Better India's Evolution of Solutions podcast and the Leadercraft podcast from Tata Sons. So I feel like I'm equipped to talk to you about the power of podcasting because I've done it for very long. And as development sector folks, I feel like it's my duty to encourage you to make podcasts. So we're going to have a little poll here. I would really like to understand, this is a vast audience, there are almost 80 of you here, and I don't want to talk down to you or try to assume you have too much information. So do you listen to podcasts? I would really love to get your answers on this, and you can just quickly take a poll here. And also, do you, if yes, how many podcasts do you listen to in a week? Do you listen to 0? Do you listen to 1 or 2, more than that, or even more than 5, which makes you a super listener? And also, do you listen, if you listen to podcasts, do you listen to any of them from the development sector? Okay, so I'm seeing that the majority of you don't listen to podcasts, and that's fine. I hope when you finish this, you will be utsuk and excited about actually going out and exploring this world, because it is a wonderful, fascinating, and amazing world. And obviously, not just because I have a stake in it, but also because I think it is just really an amazing thing. So for those of you who are really, really familiar with podcasts, I will try not to preach to the choir and try to convince you that podcasts are really the next big thing. So what is a podcast? A podcast is actually a portmanteau of the words iPod, which is an MP3 player that isn't even manufactured anymore, and broadcast. And really, it is like Netflix for your ears. When you travel, when you do anything, you can listen to audio, not radio, not music, spoken word generally, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, on the go. So that means it is absolutely, you can listen to it anywhere, anytime. It is not fixed. So like a radio, for example, a program comes on at 10 in the morning. So you have to be, in front of a radio station, or your device needs to be tuned in at 10 in the morning. Otherwise you will miss it. So it's like old fashioned. It's not like an old fashioned broadcast. It really is like Netflix, as in it's available anytime. It's also available anywhere. You can take it with you because it lives in the cloud. If you have an internet connection, it is location agnostic. So unlike radio, you don't have to be in Bombay to listen to a Bombay broadcast. You could listen to something from Zimbabwe while you're in, you know, Vasai, or you could listen to something from Copenhagen while you're down in the Fiji Islands. Most people tend to listen at home or around home or when they're traveling while doing other things, because that's the other beauty of audio. You can multitask at the same time. And if you have data, wherever and whenever you have the time or the inclination, you can listen to it. So it's really on-demand radio, kind of. But most people have taken liberties with the format. It's not just somebody talking and music and ads. You can do whatever you like with it. You can make documentaries, you can make interviews, you can make features. And so you can really, really do a lot with a podcast, just with a mobile phone and an internet connection, both to produce it and to consume it. So today, there are more than 1 million podcasts in the Apple Podcasts store. This is not a phase. This is not a little phenomenon that is a catchphrase right now. It is here to stay. And we have more than 1,700 podcasts, and regional language podcasts are growing faster than English podcasts. So don't think that this is a here today, gone tomorrow kind of a fad. It's really, really becoming a big, big deal. Now, why should an NGO make a podcast? If you've ever looked at a podcast app, which is how most people consume it, you get an app on your phone and you can subscribe to any number of shows. So this is what my phone currently looks like. Where's the camera? Yeah. These are all my subscriptions. And you can listen to crime shows, you can listen to science shows, shows about human rights, which I listen to quite a lot, some fictional shows, and storytelling are my favorites. But in India, the most popular genres are comedy, horror stories. We seem to really love them more than any other place in the world, and spirituality, no surprise there. While in America, true crime is the biggest genre, as well as news. So they get a lot of news through podcasts while they're commuting or moving around, rather than turning on the television or another screen, and comedy. So, and comedy doesn't have to be just stand-up comedy, like one comic telling you stories. But there are many, many, many other players in this market, a marketplace rather, and they're also doing good with their work. And there are a number of podcasts that deal with social sciences, with development, with sustainability, with climate change, with human rights, migrant rights, crafts, giving voice to all kinds of people. And I think podcasts are super, super important and super, super engaging because, one, they're immediate. So unlike, I'm totally making a case for podcasts here if you haven't noticed. So unlike anything else, like listening even to the radio or watching TV, these are happening in real time, and they're happening now for you as a consumer. They're also authentic because, unlike a radio show where there's a presenter who's like, this is happening, and they're sort of removed from it, podcasts are generally produced by stakeholders, people who actually care, people who have something to say about it, and they usually bring their personalities, their biases, their thought processes, and their objectives to the forefront. So you know that these people, and if they're self-produced, like you're producing it, you know there's no big media organization that has political ties that's pushing it. So it's authentic. I think podcasts are also really, really crucial because they actually give voice to the unheard. Again, it's a media that's not controlled by anybody. So if you're making a podcast, you can choose to give voice to the people you don't see in traditional media. I mean, seriously, think about the last panel you saw about the rights of Dalit women that had a Dalit woman on it. This is a big deal because these voices are controlled by the people who are trying to get the masses to listen. A podcast gives you individuality and gives you the access to people who would normally be underrepresented. They're also low cost, unlike video. They're not free, of course, but compared to video, it's easier to do work on the ground with audio. Even if you're doing case studies and field work, you really need nothing but a smartphone to capture good quality voice. You could edit very cheaply on free software, and then putting it out is a minimal cost. You can even host it for free. So it's not free, but it's low cost compared to so many other ways of getting your word out. And finally, they're accessible because really anybody who has an internet connection and any sort of device can listen to them. So they're, I think, a win-win situation for everybody. And finally, they're very, very useful. They're so useful because they can do things like reach out for you to your stakeholders. You could present them to your funders. You could present them to the general public to raise information, to change attitudes. It's all up to you, and voice is the most powerful medium of all. I mean, we are first of all an oral species, right? We learn to talk, we get our instruction through audio, and audio is powerful, evocative. All the stories we've heard from our nanas, nannies, I mean, all the gossip sessions, you know, it's really, really powerful and impactful. So podcasts can be very, very useful for organizations trying to actually spread the word about anything, really. So I'd like you to think about how podcasts would help you. We have a small poll now if you've had a moment to absorb all the things I've put out there. Pooja? Yeah, there we go. So while you're doing this, I could also just address some of the questions. YouTube is a video, and video costs more. It's harder to edit. You need a setup, you need good lighting, you need decent equipment, even if you're just using your phone. And the podcast app icon, all phones have a different native podcast app. If you're on an Android, the native podcast app is Google Podcasts. And this is what it looks like. How do I get this to focus? That's the Play Store. Sorry. So next to that is Podcast Republic, which I also use. And I'm just showing you all my icons randomly because I have really like bad control over that. That's Google Podcasts. On an iPhone, you get the Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Republic is a nice one for both the Android and iOS ecosystem. There are also places like Spotify where you could, just listen on your computer and also on your phone. But Spotify doesn't always have everything. We'll take questions at the end. If you have a question right now and you want to type it in, please put it into the question and answer box, and I will try to address them when we pause. Otherwise, there's a dedicated time for Q&A at the end. Okay, so I think you see that there are multiple ways of using podcasts, and they can be, I feel, quite a way to express things from the point of view of an NGO for many stakeholders. Right, you can see the poll results on your screen now. Okay, let's carry on. So when you're going to make a podcast, I'm going to talk now about what to do when you're thinking about a podcast. There are multiple formats and genres.
Hi, Chhavi. You're not audible for some reason.
Course, sorry?
Yes, I think we got you back. We lost you for a couple of seconds.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just say it again. If you've decided to make a podcast, there are some considerations, of course, that come into play. So one, you should figure out what format and genre you want to make your podcast in. There are other factors that will inform your decision. But what I'm going to do is actually give you some of the popular options, and you can then look at your resources and decide what would suit your organization best. So in terms of format, there are basically three to four popular ones. The first one is a monologue, which is basically, I mean, what it sounds like. One voice is speaking. So you have one person just relating something. This works very well for stories. I mean, when we tell stories, we vary our pitch, we give a voice to somebody, and we can tell stories. We all know how to do that. And it works really well for spirituality, humor, and anecdotes. These are the top kinds of podcasts that are the genres of podcasts in this format of a monologue. So monologue, I'm breaking down the formats by the number of speakers. So where there's one person speaking, a monologue can also be used to tell powerful stories of actual suffering, change, or shift. Amnesty International makes one called In Their Own Words, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is very polished, and it's very highly produced. So it's top quality, but it's one voice telling you their story. And it is gripping and hard-hitting and unmatched in the kind of feels it evokes. So if that's something you're interested in doing, there is already a torchbearer that you could listen to and emulate, or do it your own way. So I highly recommend you check it out. It's called In Their Own Words, sorry, by Amnesty International. The next format is dialogue, where two people are talking. Dialogue, two voices. So interview is probably the most common, because it's also, to be honest, the easiest and cheapest to pull off. I mean, cheapest, of course, is monologue. You need one person, one microphone, and off you go. So in a dialogue, especially now that everybody's doing everything online, you have two people talking across a screen. Generally, in pre-COVID times, we would meet in a studio or somebody's nice office with good acoustics. And in the interview, which I would differentiate from a fireside chat. A chat is, so Finding Impact is an interview type of podcast. There's also one called In the Field that you could check out. Fireside chat is a little more informal. The only difference between an interview and a fireside chat is the degree of formality. In an interview, I think there is a slight imbalance of knowledge and power. So maybe not knowledge, but the interviewer is in charge of making the interviewee put out their gyan, put out their information in a pretty one-way manner, right? So think of all the chat interviews on TV where somebody's like, okay, so what is the impact of this? How do you think this will work? What have you seen on the ground? What has changed? And it's usually somebody sharing a case study or discussing a policy and giving that information. A fireside chat is slightly different because both the people are kind of equal. So it's not one way, it's two ways. So for example, if you yourself you're the interviewee or the host rather, then you kind of have a dialogue which is more at parity. You are on the same level, you bring something and you ask questions that are more in depth, share some of your information as well, and you have knowledge on it. So the development podcast, for example, the person who's hosting it has worked extensively in various sectors across various continents. And he's very, very well versed in how everything works. This is for the World Bank. So he's lived in Africa, he's lived in South America, and he has overseen many projects. So when he has different guests, I suppose he's done his research and he has a team. His conversation is really a chat. It's a conversation. It's not a question and answer. Stanford Social Innovation Review is another very, very good podcast. You could check these out. And then when you compare them, you'll see there's a difference in pacing, a difference in flow, and a difference in information exchange. So that's the two formats, monologue and dialogue, based on how many voices. The third format is 3 people or more, really. So you could do a chat, like the Energy Grant, which is really, again, about energy and power. And the people involved are equal and innovative as well as well-informed. And The Lid is On by the World Bank is another podcast you could listen to, where two co-hosts then have a guest on, and they all have a conversation. You can also do it as a moderated panel. And the difference, of course, is just think of any panel you've been to where one person is sort of directing the conversation. They're like, okay, so this is this issue and this is the solution. There's arsenic in the water and this one device has come up. Anirudh, what do you think of this? Oh, that's an interesting answer. Ameya, you've worked in Bangladesh. What is your point of view? Do you think it'll benefit the villagers? Sandhya, you've worked here. What do you think? So, things like that, that's a panel, because one person is making sure everybody has a point of view and is expressing their different ways of analyzing or approaching a subject. So this is a moderated chat. And the sorry, I'm looking at the questions. The okay, a lot of these are questions we'll come to later, and we'll answer afterwards about duration and audience and youth and marketing and getting out there. So for now, these are the formats, and I would ask you to think about what you can do. Think about your resources, think about setup, think about internet connectivity, and of course, the stories you're trying to tell. Whose stories are you telling? The fourth format is a feature. And a feature is a little more complicated, but this is my favorite, and this is what my company Sonologue specializes in. I've been doing this for a very, very long time, and this is what works best for the development sector, I feel. Because rather than having your CFO talking to your host about, I'm very biased, I'm going to put this out there. I listen to all these podcasts, but this is where my heart is. So instead of having two talking heads, what I want and what I produce and what I really passionately feel strongly about is having the voices of the people who are affected or are actually on the ground. And the best way to do this is in a feature. So a feature is something that is produced more. So it's not like a conversation and you just edit out the flubby bits, or if you suddenly have a giggle fit or you go off topic, you just cut that out. A feature is much more involved, and it involves more than three voices generally. There's a host, there is somebody from the field, there is usually an expert, there's usually a stakeholder. So for example, from Bangladesh, for People Fixing the World, which is the first podcast I've recommended here, it's a solutions podcast. We tackled many, I went to Bangladesh and actually did a story, a podcast, several podcasts about different sustainability issues. And one of them was about human rights, access to water, like a bunch of SDG goals and things like that, about arsenic in the water. We also did something about insurance for factory workers. So let me break down the insurance for factory workers sort of thing. I went to the factory. I interviewed a bunch of people who had gotten the insurance from the scheme. I talked to a bunch of people who did not get the insurance and why, right? And while we're talking, there are so many threads to this. There's patriarchy, there's financial hardship, there's migration issues, there's all kinds of things, and you have to sort of weave them in. But of course, our focus was on this innovative solution. I then talked to the guy who's running the scheme. I talked to the factory owner. I talked to an expert on labor economics. I talked to a woman who studies women in the labor force. And we went around, we talked to an academic in the university, again, about, and we talked to the government. We talked to the government and we talked to the union of garment factory workers, okay? I have something like 3 gigabytes of audio that was then condensed into a 25-minute podcast that featured, and it was heavily edited. We had very small clip pieces, links, audio from all these people to tell this massive story of the problem, who's impacted, what is the solution, is there a real answer, is it working, what is the government saying? And I'm really proud of it. I think it really made an impact. We've done this kind of reporting can be heavy like this, or evolution of solutions where it's just a couple of voices talking. We did this in COVID times. But check these out, and I'm hoping at least some of you will feel strongly about incorporating these kinds of tactics in your podcast, because the only way to get, people have called podcasts the empathy machine. And I think that is the most true summation of their power. Because how do you empathize with somebody that you've just never identified with? The other. And we other people all the time. And your work is to make the other come into the conversation, to come into the forefront, to benefit them, to make people like us care, and to change attitudes, to create different feelings, to change thought processes, to present people on the ground. I think features can do it better than anybody else. Okay, I'll stop evangelizing features. And what I'm going to do next after this is also play you some examples. So I can put the recommended podcasts over chat while you do the next Actually, there's a document. If you guys will figure it out of how to share it with you. So think about these questions before you decide the format, and also, of course, look at your resources. So whose story do you want to tell? Are you telling the story of your organization, in which case maybe one of you can do it? Or are you telling the story of impact of the ground, in which case I would urge you to include the voices from the ground? What access do you have? Can you talk to the CFOs, the government, the stakeholders, the policy committees? It's COVID. Do you have access to the places you work at in the ground? What resources do you have in terms of time? Will you be able to get somebody to edit your story? Will you get somebody on board to put the time into researching, getting statistics? You know, you can't put misinformation out there. And then finally, who's listening and how? Somebody had asked about people in Bihar who don't even know what a podcast is. You don't have to know what a podcast is to listen to it or appreciate it. You know, we can make it accessible. If you're working with people on the ground and they have a smartphone, you know, people have podcast listening parties, people who don't even know the word podcast. They have one smartphone that they go to the village that has internet and data, they charge their phone, they get the stories, they come back, and then everybody sits around, and one person needs to know how to press play and operate it, and you can put the information in whatever language they're listening in, and they will listen. So are they going to listen? Who's listening? If they're listening in rural Bihar, obviously making a podcast in English is not the answer. So you have to figure out who's listening, where are they listening, how, and then these answers will help you figure out which podcast is right for you. So I think we've got a, do we have a poll here? Let me see. We've got a poll coming up, yeah. So I'm going to play you some examples of my the podcast I really, really like. And I'd like you to listen.
We were trapped, imprisoned. It's as simple as that. Bulldozers on one side of the town destroying our crops, snipers on the other. And all around us, minefields, checkpoints, soldiers drunk with war and power. And inside the town...
Oh, I'm sorry. What the heck? Sorry. I'm just going to restart it, okay?
We were trapped, imprisoned. It's as simple as that. Bulldozers on one side of the town destroying our crops, snipers on the other. And all around us, minefields, checkpoints, soldiers drunk with war and power. And inside the town, missiles exploding over our heads, raining down maimings, amputations, and death.
I'd always known I'd end up here, or somewhere like here. I'd known since I was 9 years old. I was watching television with my mother when images of famine were beamed into our suburban living room.
Famine caused by drought is the worst in living memory.
I know what I'm going to do, I told my mother. I'm going to help children like this. From that moment on, I never wanted to do anything else. My first assignment was to Mogadishu. That was 8 years ago. And I've been working with children in crisis ever since. I've worked in war-torn countries and countless refugee camps, flying from one emergency to another, into earthquakes, hurricanes, droughts. My role is to listen to children, to record what they tell me and communicate their needs to the rest of the world. I thought I'd seen and heard a lot, until the civil war in Syria. Soon after the conflict started, I was talking with refugee children on the Syria-Lebanon border, trying to find out what they needed. I thought I knew what they'd tell me about. Long bread queues, dirty drinking water. But nothing prepared me for what I actually heard.
After the missiles and bombings came the kidnappings. Armed groups roaming the town, massacres.
Okay, this is a kind of feature, but you know, there's no formula for how it should be, and I think this works really nicely because it's just immediacy of the voices. And I don't know if you felt it, but I think the music adds a lot of mood and it transports you, right? This is very intimate. Somebody is telling you their story one-on-one in your ears. And I think it's a brilliant example.
In all areas for achieving gender equality, like having women's access to economic resources, advancing women's political participation, having more mobility in public spaces, for example, it cannot be achieved, and women, they cannot realize their human rights if they're not free from violence.
That was Calliope Minjeru, Chief of the Ending Violence Against Women section here at UN Women.
That amazing interview with her, and very apropos.
Indeed, because we are here because this is our International Women's Day episode.
That is correct, which is a day that has been recognized by the United Nations since the mid-'70s, right? I believe 1975.
And it's exciting. It's our first International Women's Day episode, and we're going to take a little bit of a different spin on it. In some sense, every day is Women's Day, or should be.
Or
anyway.
should be.
But what we want to do in this episode is to think about why women are not achieving equality in the way that they should be. And a huge part of that
is violence against women.
Is violence against women. So first of all, let's define for our audience what violence is.
There's plenty of different types, right? Like physical, sexual, maybe the ones that you're most...
Exactly. I think the physical and sexual are the ones that come to mind immediately. And those are very grave, and we are going to talk more about them in this episode.
Sorry. Okay, so that is a chat, right? These are two people who are clearly equal partners having a conversation. And then what they do is they also mix it up. So it becomes a hybrid sort of a format. And they also have a guest sometimes and do an interview within it. So you can do that too. You can mix and match.
Leyla Alieva is one of the President of Azerbaijan's daughters. She's an artist and a socialite, kind of like Kim Kardashian, but with a more powerful family. She owns a £17 million house in London, hangs out with royalty, and was married to a pop star. But Leyla enjoys a lot more freedom and luxury than some of her fellow citizens. Government critics in Azerbaijan face arrest and imprisonment. Peaceful protesters have been tear-gassed and beaten, and journalists face severe punishment, sometimes including torture and death. This is in their own words, and today we hear from one particular journalist who exposed some of the corruption behind Leyla's family wealth and the secret to her charmed life. For this, she was punished in a uniquely cruel and humiliating way. This is Khadija Ismailova, and this is her story.
I grew up in a family that was one of the well-doing families in the Soviet Union. My father was a member of parliament. He was a respected person. Both mother and father were very outspoken. When National Liberation Movement started, my father was communist. My mother was in opposition. I was 13 when I started the first youth organization together with friends in our school and other schools. So the movement was about liberating the country from the Soviet Union to get rid of communism. My father was a member of the Soviet parliament, and there was a time when he was inside the parliament and his daughters were outside of the parliament.
Okay, so this is pretty much a straight up monologue. This is in their own words from Amnesty International. The first podcast I played is called Anywhere But Home, and it's by Save the Children. And that's a feature. It's actually slightly, they have the stories of children, but then because you know there are legal issues and privacy issues with also putting the voices of children out there, especially refugee children, They took the stories, made a composite, and actually made a fictionalized drama sort of out of it. And it's very, very powerful, and it did very, very well. The second one was UN Women. So this was Anywhere But Home. The second was UN Women. The third one is In Their Own Words. And I'll play you one more so you can just see the difference of formats. Oh, this is me. Welcome back to Evolution of Solutions, the podcast in which we take a closer look at emerging technologies and how they contribute to a better tomorrow. I'm Chhavi Sachdev, and in each episode of this series, brought to you by the Better India in association with Accenture, I join leading experts for an in-depth discussion on a powerful technology of the day, such as AI or VR, that is driving large-scale change. Now, Alexa, drum roll, please. Because today we're going to talk about what drives the Alexas and Apple Watches, the smart homes and smart cities, connected cars, intelligent factories. We're going to talk about the Internet of Things. And to do this, I've tapped two of the best minds in the IoT world who are working on solutions to widely different problems that affect society. I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Ranjana, co-founder and CEO of Ray IoT Solutions. I've been working on IoT products for like the past 5 years, and we have had a lot of experience creating IoT products that would, empower people's lives with data. It can be regarding their health. It can be, like daily tasks, empowering people with data to make their lives better.
Yeah, my name is Arjun P. Gupta. I'm the founder and CEO.
Okay, so this is actually a feature, even though it sounds like a Q&A or a panel, where I recorded this because it was COVID on Zoom, and we'll talk about tools in a second. But in non-COVID times, let me tell you, if budget had not been an issue, which I would have totally made the space and time for, I would have gone and met them, because the work they're doing is so cool. I would have liked to have sounds from the ground. So in Arjun's actual work, he uses the Internet of Things to monitor energy, and he works on environmental solutions for big cooling facilities like factories. And I would have gone and taped the sound of the fans whirring or his, something beeping. But we had to do this kind of dry. And I interviewed them separately, and then came back, scripted it, and I act as the link between them. And we have some sound effects that we were able to gather, but it's a little difficult. So again, we'll talk about tools in a second. I just want to talk to you a little more about what you think you're going to do. So if you have a topic or a theme, I would love to see where you're at. And then if you're thinking of a format as well based on that, I would love to see that on the poll. And I think we finished the last poll about people thought that a podcast would help with all these things, telling the general public, donors and funders about the work, giving voice to the communities, as well as giving voice to your field workers. All right. So what kind of podcast format would suit you the best? Interview, narrated feature, or a fiction or drama? I'm doing a podcast project right now for the worldwide WCA. And I've learned a lot about them. I didn't even know that they work so much on so many topics around so many countries. And I was talking to somebody in Palestine yesterday, and they are they're doing a campaign on gender-based violence. And they got 5 women to speak to them about their different experiences of gender-based violence, but then none of the women would go public, right? It's a very private issue in a very patriarchal society. And so what they did is exactly this. They sort of fictionalized it. They made a composite. They used their stories and then got a voice actor to, and a male and a female to sort of enact them. And I mean, it's a different world, but I think in the West, like something like that would need trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning all over it, because it is so impactful. Like I was like flinching at the depicted violence, and it was heartbreaking, but it was so well done, and in such a easy way. So sometimes you can use fiction or drama to put a point across when you can't get the actors themselves to be a part of the actual podcast. Okay, great. So I'm gonna end the polling. 47% have voted, and or okay, we'll give it another minute. So think about what will work best for you. And in an interview, it's not like you can't go to your field and talk to people about the impact they've seen or felt or had, or the problems and things like that. I think you just have to make sure you couch it in a way that's not that's engaging, right? That's a challenge. Everybody doesn't want to just hear people complaining, and people are saturated with all kinds of negative news. So positive spins, solutions are really welcome, and I would encourage you to look through that lens. So we'll look at the results. Lots of people want to do narrated features, which I'm very happy about, and we will talk about how to do that in a second. So it's not rocket science, but it does take a lot of commitment. You're going to need to get all these things sorted out. And sometimes it won't cost you money, but it will certainly cost you time, and you will need equipment. And if you want to market it, you're going to need some money or some sweat equity. And I would encourage you also to have a plan, so that you're not just going into it blind, but you can also figure out how to get the maximum reach. So you want to figure out your content and direction. What are you talking about? How and why? What format? What genre? You want to put aside time to get everything right. Just scheduling interviews, making sure you have the right data, putting that data into a script perhaps, people to host it or voice it, go out, conduct interviews, the equipment to do it. You're going to need some exhaustive commitment in terms of time, and maybe a little money. You might need to buy a mic, which I highly encourage. So we'll talk about tools. And you should also, you'll need hosting, which means you'll have to figure out like how frequently are you going to do it and what's your duration. So let's talk very quickly. I'm basically done with my presentation, and I'm going to answer these are questions that have come in the chat box. So we're going to talk about duration, frequency, and also we're going to talk about tools. So I'm going to doing the Q&A. I'll put the slide back up with the names of the podcasts, because we don't really have a way to share them. I'll put them on the wall of the event, but I would encourage you to take notes because there's no way I can copy paste it, and we don't really have chat. So the impact of a podcast is that it can give people voice. It has great engagement. You can change attitudes. You can convey information. You can affect policy. There are podcasts that have done this. There are podcasts that have freed people who have been incarcerated wrongly. I'm not even joking. There's a podcast called In the Dark that has resulted in 2 overturned convictions. You can have bills passed. That's what the Palestinians are trying to do for protection of women from gender-based violence. And you can definitely reach people and give them a window into a world they're not normally exposed to. So all of this can result in action, and podcasts are a good way of doing that. So I'm going to end it here, and with this lovely this little tidbit really impressed me, that people actually listen to podcasts to improve their thinking or mindset. Isn't that wonderful? When you want to think the worst of the world, there are people out there who seek out good content because they actually want to improve their thinking or mindset. I think that's great. So we're going to go on to the questions, and I'm going to go back to the slide where we had the names of the podcasts, if anybody wants to actually take the names of them, right? Okay, so for tools, the basic stuff you need is you really need a microphone, and you need headphones. You can record on your phone, and I'll tell you the names of the apps. Please write them down. The ones I recommend are the Shure Motive Audio app. It's this, gosh, I'm so bad at this. Where is it? It's this one with the S in the center, right? Right in the middle. That one. Shure, S-H-U-R-E, Motive Audio. It works on iOS and Android. I would recommend you use a microphone, definitely. because on your device, the microphone is very wide. It will pick up all the noise around you. While, and even this is what I'm using because I'm not in my office right now. But this is also too broad. It's called omnidirectional, omni meaning everywhere, and you don't want that. So you'll have to invest in a decent mic. In equipment, you get what you pay for. If you pay 200 rupees, I don't even bother. Like, why? Just put aside a little money. And Sonologue.com, which is my website, we have a affiliate store on Amazon. You'll get a little discount. I put all discounted things there, and I get 1% or something crazy like that. And I have some recommendations up. So you can look on Sonologue.com and search. You can also, if you're going into the field, buy a handheld recorder. This is a Tascam. It has 2 microphones. It also has a line in for a mic. So you can use a mic to get different sound. And it has a digital display and everything. And it records in very good quality. It has an excellent sound card, broadcast quality audio. This is not super expensive, and it's very versatile. You can use it to record yourself in your office also, to do your narration, and you can take it out in the field. So this is about 9,000, I think. And there are cheaper ones out there. There's a Zoom, Z-O-O-M, H1N1, which is about 5,000. And that, again, is not, it's good enough. It's really good enough. And it's got the mic, and it's got this. And you have to plug in headphones when you're using it. You have to. Because otherwise, you will pick up stuff that you didn't know is getting recorded because your ears can't hear them. All of us are deafened by traffic and loud noises in our country. This microphone is more sensitive. It will pick up things that when you go back and listen, you're like, oh crap, what is this stuff? And you can't use it. Because bad audio will make your audience tune out faster than anything else. So this is a good all-in-one tool. The other one is a Zoom, Z-O-O-M. Again, all is available on Amazon. And if you're recording on your phone, you can also get an external mic, Shure, which makes the same app I showed you, makes a microphone kit, which is a little expensive. It's 20,000, but it's usable with your phone and your computer. You can also record into your computer, but you must use a mic. That is non-negotiable, and you must use headphones to do that. Okay, Rajiv, do you have a question about Shure, S-H-U-R-E? Okay, I don't know if you guys can see the answers. I just answered anonymous attendees answer live. I think they're in the answered section, yeah. So the basic equipment you need really is microphone. So either get a recorder and headphones, or get a microphone and headphones and use it with your phone or your laptop. Okay, are we clear? So recorder and headphones over your ears, okay, not these, because these will block nothing. Everything will come through your ears. You won't even know what you're hearing. So this plus headphones, or phone plus mic plus headphones. Okay, Rajiv, Pooja, are you able to turn on whoever, I mean, is asking questions, or how do we do it?
Yes, sure, we can do that. Just give me a moment.
Okay,
we have Rajiv Koyal.
Yeah, I'm going to switch to the next slide, which has the features listed on it, okay? Sorry, this one and then the features.
So Rajiv, you could put your question in the chat box.
Yeah, that would actually be better.
Yes.
Okay, so duration and frequency. There is no limit, upper or higher. There is no limit. If you have a 2-minute podcast and that's all you have to say, you can do it. If you have a 2-hour podcast, you can do it. It might be better to break it up into 3 smaller podcasts, or 2 smaller podcasts of 1 hour. Let your content drive your duration. You can't let your duration drive your content. Don't say, I'm going to make a 45-minute podcast, and then when you run out of things to say in 20 minutes, you're just dragging the issue. Forget it. Keep it tight. People don't have time to waste. Everybody's got 1,000 things they could be doing, listening to, or watching. There is not just podcasts, there is YouTube, there's TV, there's people have, I mean, books, whatever. Really, you're competing for their attention. Don't waste anybody's time. Keep it really, really tight. And I can't overstate editing. Coming back to tools, After you've recorded it, you also need an editing software. So I use Audacity, which is a free and open software that helps you edit. And if you can use Microsoft Word, you can certainly use Audacity. We have very limited time here. We have to finish in 5 minutes. Oh, no, now actually. But I do workshops that get into this. This is really an overview to introduce the podcast. I can't get into all the in-depth stuff about editing and production here. Once you host it, you put up, the next step is putting your podcast up on a hosting platform. Spotify is one. There are paid podcast hosts that are better because they have better reach. And those guys will also make sure that it's available everywhere else. And you probably have to pay a little bit for it. And they will help you with tracking who's listening and who is the numbers and stats, which if you're getting funding, of course, you will have to share with your funders and things like that. And the feedback system is probably through your social media. You put a call to action at the end, write to us, tweet us, email us your questions, things like that. So that is the kind of feedback loop you'll have to set up. Podcasts are, you put it out there, somebody's listened, it's gone. So to hear back from people, you have to ask them. But you can track how they've listened and where they've listened and how many have listened through your podcasting host platform. All right. I don't know if there are any, somebody said holding listeners' attention is a challenge. Yes, it's a challenge, but that's your challenge. And as you can see or hear from the examples I shared with you, it's not rocket science. It is something that is a skill that can be learned. And just like an audio documentary, it can definitely be used as an educational tool. You can use it to convey any information you want to anybody out there. So recording remotely, you can put it in a monologue, a dialogue, and you'll be all set. For recording feature formats with everything remote, I use a combination of people recording themselves and also Zoom. So I'm not going to share the PPT. I hope you've taken notes on the podcast names. There is a document that I will put on the wall of the event, or Pooja will assist me to do that. And we can end this. The handheld recorder is called a Tascam or a Zoom. I've just put it into the answered Q&A. Okay, I think we've basically gotten through most of the questions. And if you look in the answered section, you'll see my answers before this session shuts. Okay, and I hope you've also been able to write down the names of these recommendations. There are a lot of podcasts. If you go to your podcast app on your phone, like Podcast Republic or Google Podcasts, you can just search by topic. Do a search for whatever you're working in: climate change, migration, rural rights, banking, microfinance, reviving handicrafts, and you will find something. And if there is not something, please, that means you should make your podcast happen. So don't forget that podcasts are very, very impactful for a low investment in terms at least of cost. And they are really fun to do. And I think the world is your oyster if you choose to actually do a podcast. And the development sector could certainly use these podcasts. For my workshops, yes, you can look on sonologue.com. I'm going to put that in there. And I do some, so I don't have the bandwidth to listen to everybody's podcasts. I do mentoring. I've already got a mentor right now. I do consulting. You can schedule something and we can set something up for your organization. And we also do production. But workshops will be coming up. CSR Box is going to do one on features very, very soon. So stay in touch with them or stay in touch with me. I have a mailing list and I hope that I can see you for one of those workshops if you're interested in pursuing a podcast, which I fervently hope you are. And if nothing else, I hope you leave this workshop, this masterclass, at least aware that there is a new thing that you can consume even in your own field of work. And there are different, multiple, amazing ways of putting your story out there through audio. So thank you for your time. And I hope to see you at our next workshop with CSR Box.